Lahav Harkov, the Jerusalem Post diplomatic correspondent, will join us now for an interview with Aryeh Lightstone, the United States Special Envoy for Economic Normalization in the Middle East.
Thank you so much for joining us at our conference. I think you're sort of uniquely positioned to comment on the topic of the conference since we are at the UAE-Israel Business Summit. Could you tell us a little bit about your position as Special Envoy for Economic Normalization? What does that entail?
First of all, thank you, and thank you for all the hosts for having me here today. It's really an honor and a privilege to have been on the sidelines of some of the most exciting things to happen in 2020, obviously carrying into 2021. I was appointed by Secretary Pompeo as a special envoy for economic normalization just recently, but I've been serving that role de facto since the first phone call on August 13th in between Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, Prime Minister Netanyahu, and obviously President Trump. The moment in that room in the Oval Office was infectious with enthusiasm and excitement. And as with everything involving Jared Kushner and Secretary Pompeo and my original boss and still mentor, Ambassador David Friedman, the question is, what do you do with momentum and excitement? And what we've tried to do, endeavored to do, and to a great degree succeeded in doing is to try to create facts on the ground that will yield excitement for that original Abraham Accord agreement, but also to induce and to excite other countries to join this ever-growing circle of peace and stability in the region.
Well, we were both on that first ever flight from Israel to Abu Dhabi on August 31st of last year. And I remember seeing you in some of those rooms where discussions were being had between the UAE and Israel and the different kinds of cooperation. Could you tell us a little bit about how you were able to sort of facilitate things from moving from a normalization agreement that's written down and that are a bunch of good, positive ideas to really facts on the ground that are, businesses flourishing and all kinds of economic partnerships?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. First of all, a piece of paper is a piece of paper. It's what do you do with that piece of paper that really matters. I will make one comment since you mentioned the flight. You've been on countless flights. I've certainly been on countless flights as well. The first flight I've ever been on that there was a round of applause based upon the taxing announcement. When it was announced that this was going to be the first ever flight from Israel to Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, people started clapping. Nobody ever claps at the beginning of a flight. On occasion when you land, never when you take off.
And there was in the middle, too, when we flew over Saudi Arabia for the first time. Pretty incredible moment as well.
Yes, there was clapping in the middle as well. There was a lot of clapping on the flight. The enthusiasm was infectious. And I'll tell you, it was well justified because when we landed, we were greeted so warmly, the Americans, the Israelis, the Emiratis. It wasn't a question of what we were going to do. It was just a question of prioritizing the order of how to get it done. And that's really where I think the United States played a critical role. There's an enormous amount to do when two countries who have so much in common, so many mutual interests, so much desire to work together, and they have now this opportunity to again collide together. You want that collision to be as frictionless as humanly possible, and you want it to yield positive experiences. In a normal circumstance, this would have been far easier. But in COVID, lack of flights, lack of embassies, significant health risks each and every time somebody were to journey from one country to the other, lots of restrictions. It became the role of the United States to say, okay, what can we do? In what order can we do it? How do we achieve this? That way we can check that box, and that enables these other doors to open. And I learned more about civil aviation and visas than I ever intended to and frankly ever wanted to. Banking agreements and investment agreements. So understanding that without those foundational building blocks, the business that the countries wanted to do together wouldn't be able to be done. Just as an example, a day after the first phone call, I got a call from the space team in the UAE and in Israel saying, let's collaborate on building something to go to space together. And that's a fantastic idea. But maybe first we should figure out whether you can make direct phone calls in between the two countries before you figure out whether you can build a space shuttle that will go to the moon together or to Mars, actually, in that case. So the enthusiasm, the excitement was there. Sometimes you have to slow down and just put the building blocks in that build the foundation for that success.
So what is an example of a project between Israel and the UAE that you're especially excited about?
We can go straight to space. I found it very interesting that over the last 3 to 4 years, growing up, I heard a lot about space, and then there was about a 25-year gap where it was something you saw a movie about, but you didn't hear commonly discussed in the newspapers. Israel with their Space IL launch, and the UAE with I believe called the Hope, their launch as well within the last 8-9 months, demonstrated two things that I think are very profound. If you look at the Middle East, and as Jared Kushner said just 10 days ago in Jerusalem, people should stop looking at the Middle East as a source of problems, but rather as a source of solutions. If you look at Israel on one end and the UAE on the other end, over the last 75 years, it's difficult to find countries that have done more to grant stability to their part of their region and success to their inhabitants and to their citizens. And we look at their ability to combine those powers together and to go ahead and to grow in that way, it's truly exciting. So you've got space on one end, but on the other end is just plain and simple tourism. If you look at 2020, it is impossible to ever fill the hotel rooms that sat empty or sell the falafel that stayed in the stand. It'll never grow again. You can't sell a bed that wasn't slept in. But if you're going to open up a brand new market that has never been tapped, it's the promise of 2021 and beyond that gives hope to those businesses, those small businesses that have suffered tremendously this year. And each and every one of them, to a person, he and she have told me, if I can make it to 2021, 2022, we're going to flourish like we've never flourished before, because the opening of a brand new market that they never anticipated. It wasn't in any of the business plans, and it wasn't calculated in any of the both equity or debt opportunities what these brand new markets would bring for the small business owners. So you've got space on one end, which is unbelievable, and on the other end, you've got the person who owns the falafel store or drives the cab, equally excited about 2021 and 2022. And you know you've done something right when both of those cohorts are enthusiastic about it.
Well, that does sound very exciting. I wanted to ask you about a different country. I understand you were very instrumental in getting normalization between Israel and Sudan off the ground. Now, that's going to be a very different kind of relationship because Sudan is, of course, in a dire economic straits that it is trying to dig itself out of. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about what you expect from that relationship.
Yeah, so I'll tell you a couple different things. With the leadership of Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, the President Jared Kushner and Prime Minister Netanyahu, the message was clear from every hall of power: go big and go quick. And what that means is once you've committed to change a region for the better, that change should not be isolated to 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 countries. What we're creating should be so big and so bold and so changing that other people are going to want to grab onto that. And that's what we had with Sudan. We're wishing Sudan an enormous amount of luck as they change their future. We'll help them in the U.S. I know Israel is standing by to help them, but uniquely enough, the UAE and Bahrain are standing by to help as well. And Sudan is going to be a testament to the success of the Abraham Accords, not because one country, ours, the superpower, has the ability to do it on our own, but we need local partners. And the United Arab Emirates, the State of Israel, the Kingdom of Bahrain, and others are going to be invested in the success of Sudan. And here's the advantage to Sudan. It's really a blank slate. The transitional government is going to merge into a full-time, permanent, hopefully democratic government. It's going to give opportunities for their citizens, and it's going to create a safer anchor to that part of the region. And that's going to make everybody more safe and more prosperous. And I know that here's business. If you and I are on the opposite side of a negotiating table and maybe there's some friction or maybe we're not positive where the win is, but we look at a third target business that we can look at together where it's very clear what I bring to the table and it's very clear what you bring to the table, oftentimes that's an easier conversation. And so I see Sudan as an opportunity for all of the other Abraham Accord countries to rally around, invest in their success. The economic opportunities are very significant, and the value of Sudan having a stable, meaningful, prosperous economy, the ripple effect that will have on that component of Africa is immeasurable from an investment perspective.
Well, on that hopeful note, we need to wrap up. So thank you again. Thank you so much for all the help in getting these things done for Israel and for the region, and for being here at the conference.
Lav, thank you so much for always spending time with me. I'll just tell you, you say it's for Israel, it's for the region. It's not, it's for the United States. How many times have people looked at from the United States perspective and said the Middle East is a source of challenge? This administration, again, led by Ambassador Friedman, Jared Kushner, Secretary Pompeo, and Avi Berkowitz, of course, have taken a different approach. And in this approach, they've said, look at what can be positive that can come out of here. And when you look at 2020, I think it's going to be remembered for COVID, but it's also going to be remembered for the Abraham Accords. And it's been a very significant honor to play a small role in figuring out how this region can be the source of hope and opportunity for the entire world instead of a source of challenge and frustration. So thank you for always giving us a chance, and thanks for supporting this in a big way.
Thank you.